Welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. This week, we have two good friends making a special cameo appearance to talk a little bit more about APIs and the service-oriented future. It's been nearly 20 years since Jeff Bezos and the memo. How have APIs evolved since then? Where do gateways actually come in? And what can we expect over the next 20 years of cloud development and how to truly build a composable enterprise? Stick around. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Capturing the Intangibles. How's it been, Massimo?
Good, very good. Today we're missing Rick. I guess, when we talk about API, he's always scared, so he's just vanished. But I think we have special guys here today, and I'm very thrilled to have them so we can have a very good discussion about APIs.
Yeah, good point. We have a couple of new people actually joining us today, actually people that we've known for a very long time, actually friends at this point. I've gone on vacation with one of them a couple of times now. So guys, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell everybody who's listening and watching who you guys are, why we've invited you here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. My name is Vignesh Subramanian. I'm Director of Product Management with the InfoOS Group, working for Massimo. This August, I will be 20 years working at Infor. So I'm a veteran in the company, you can say. Always worked around technology, integrations, security, AI, automation, and so on. I'm currently also responsible for the product management of API strategy, API gateway, integrations, process automations, and AI digital assistant, and so on.
You forgot piano.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I do music for my hobby. I play predominantly South Indian film music. I have a YouTube channel called Volinvicky. I have about 3,300 subscribers.
Oh, not bad.
My channel is reaching 1 million views. So
yeah,
that's nice.
We'll put that down in the show notes, Vignesh, for you.
All right.
Crank up those stats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Vignesh has another name, his last name looks, sounds like a Superman. A lot of people call it Superman because it's really Superman, dealing with all kind of things. And it's really one of the Supermen that we have in the team, absolutely.
What about you, Vish?
All right. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. My name is Vish Kalipe. I've been with Infor for last 6 years. Been working in the InfoOS team. So within InfoOS, among other things, I primarily work on the development of the API gateway, Iron API gateway, and Federation Hub as well, which facilitates the API and web security. And prior to Infor, I've worked on different ESBs and identity federation, which is actually what gave me this opportunity to work on InfoOS. That's about me.
Nice, very nice, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, so the common theme, apart from the fact that we all work together every single day, but the common theme between the two of you is that you guys both work on APIs, API gateways, everything to do with interoperability between systems, right? And so that's the idea behind today's episode here, which is really talking about APIs in a little bit more granular level, and actually kind of digging deeper into like the ethos, the design, the concepts behind, and what's driving interoperability between systems. So I think that's actually a good place to start, which is just about coming up on 20 years now. Jeff Bezos at Amazon, back when they were more so a bookstore or online retailer, came out with the mandate, right? The memo. And he said, effective immediately, everyone needs to start making sure that they have APIs and services embedded across every single granular feature within their products. And everyone freaked out, right? Everyone all of a sudden had to drop everything and start working on APIs. And now we're 20 years past that. So there's quite a bit of distance now. Can't believe it's actually 20 years ago, but there's a lot of distance between that memo and what's happened as part of the entire industry shifting towards that same exact ethos here. So yeah, can you, Vignesh, especially you, given that you deal with so much of the gateway stuff from the product management side, and you deal with so many people going through these types of decisions and everything, kind of walk us through the eras. Help us understand how did APIs as a competency kind of evolve over the last 20 years from where it began back when the mandate came out to where we are today.
Yeah, that mandate of Jeff Bezos is something I quote very often too. Yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable. It's been 20 years. I mean, APIs by itself is not absolutely groundbreaking new concept, right? As long as systems have spoken with each other, APIs have been around. It started as remote procedural calls. And I think the API as we know it started to emerge on the e-commerce era, on the web 1.0 era, when Bezos was making everything, taking everything online. The Web 1.0 era was like the forerunner. It had mostly XML-based data interchange. It was predominantly SOAP protocol-based. That was a very good start, but of course it was a bit heavy as the industry evolved. And then we came to the Web 2.0 world where we started dealing more with the JSONs as the de facto language for system to speak with each other, and the HTTP protocol matured a lot, and all the traffic that happens over HTTP by de facto became API based data exchanges. And in order to facilitate that, born this new standard of REST API, RESTful services, which was great, which was like purpose built for HTTP, and was imbibing all the verb-based patterns like how to create something, how to delete something, read something, and so on. They were all pretty good with REST. So that was a great evolution of this API-based paradigm. REST continues to rule the roost. Still one of the best standards around. Very popular. It also has cool features, for example, like HTOs. The industry persons would recognize terms like that, where the clients need not know a lot. They can ask the server, "Hey, what have you got?" And once the server responds, they can kind of improvise and then continue with the data interaction and so on. So REST absolutely is a great evolution from SOAP. And then of course, along this came along the deployment changes, right? Originally, software was running on premise, and then software moved as a service to the cloud. That is, of course, the defining moment, seminal moment in our software, landscape as we speak right now. And APIs, guess what, are the driving force of the whole SaaS story. Anything that happens in SaaS is through APIs. When you have your mobile application, all the mobile apps get data from wherever they are in some form or the other through an API. So with that, SaaS brings its own challenges, right? And the SaaS challenge is mainly twofold, I would say. One is security, and the next is scalability. Let's just peel both of them one by one, right? Security, of course, your API is no more running on the safe haven of your own network. It is exposed to internet. And that is a game changer. So you are a sitting duck to be hacked by all the hackers. You cannot let that happen. So you need a solid security framework when your APIs are accessible via internet. And there again, security threats can be of many shapes and forms, right? It can be plain and simple hacking of your credentials, or it can be a denial of service attack type of an attack where just people will bombard you with enormous amount of requests to bring you down, or it could be some kind of a code injection where they execute a malicious code on your layer and completely take over, right? So again, your business API, whose core functionality was to do some kind of a special use case, you no more have to worry about just the functional competency. You have to worry about all this security competency which your API needs to provide. And obviously, then it doesn't make sense. Every API provider does this. Then we need an API management layer where you safely host all your business critical APIs behind the firewall, behind your secure environment, and then you front your infrastructure through a gateway to the internet. And therefore, this gateway must be super secure with all type of hardening. And it makes sense that every other API you may have all use the same common gateway, right? So that's how we address the security part.
Yeah, and Vignesh, just sorry to interrupt you. So, I understand all the requirements and all of that. You see still applications not using gateways and getting exposed directly to the internet, but then they are exposed to the entire issues of someone can really go and call a lot of APIs, and you don't need that. So you need that scalability. And I had a question for Vish as well. Like, Vish, you have built something that it's really so valuable for us. You just reached a billion API calls, which is an amazing performance. How do you make that scalable? How do you build for that scalability, right? A gateway. We understand the features and all that, but now how do you scale for a billion or even later, maybe even more calls, right? API calls.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. So before I talk about the scalability part, just want to complement what Vignesh was saying, and like we say, necessity is mother of invention. The API strategies have been reflection of what their eras are, and then going through the evolution of RPCs, Corba, RMI, SOAP, which is sort of coinciding with the mandate that Mike brought up. APIs are really, reflecting or catering to the era that they are serving. Basically, so like Vignesh mentioned, when monolith applications started breaking into microservices, that's when the API gateways came in to sort of bring in the single entry point, uniform security, and the whole idea is behind is it like, do you want everybody to reinvent the wheel, or do you want to get this common layer, put it in the API gateway, and then let the API developers focus on business functionality or data exchange, and let the API gateway handle the specialized things, right? And now coming to your question about scaling, really so the big question, like anybody comes to come to adopting API gateway, they say, yeah, what's the overhead you're adding, right? What is it that you're giving me? And the whole design philosophy we started with was like, how do we minimize the overhead of someone using the API gateway while maximizing the value that they get out of it, right? So first and foremost, security, we opted for OAuth 2, very solid security for the cloud world. And then we looked at, what are the components that are going to be handling the, actual incoming security policies, enrichment for the target APIs, and how do we, minimize that? And we, really utilize this cloud native architecture where we added horizontal scalability, and luckily, most of the APIs are stateless. I say most because there are still some APIs that utilize cookie, but yeah, APIs are stateless, and with the horizontal scalability and the cloud computing, we really got tremendous performance out of it. So yeah, that was the key where we decoupled the parts where you have to get the execution plans or routing logic and fix it in the cache, and then just let the engine handle the runtime request and scale.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good just general introduction to the last 20 years over here, because it sounds like basically everyone was off on their own, creating APIs, their own URL endpoints, their own input and output parameters, maybe some documentation if you were lucky, different security, everything, right? So gateways kind of bridge a lot of this management interfaces to provide same thing that integration platforms have done for a very long time. But Massimo, I'm actually kind of curious from your perspective, because like you lead an entire global team that deals in technology day in and day out. So your two favorite things are micro architecture and microservices. Well, spaghetti. So that's number two. But number three is also APIs, right? So from your perspective, I mean, for the teams that you're running and managing and everything like that, obviously there's a need and there's an importance on having APIs for everything. But why are you such a huge proponent of that for all of our software services as vendors, right? As document management products, as data products like Data Lake and so on. Why is that actually important, and why is that actually something that you actually say, we need to develop APIs first and then figure out, how do we build UIs and elegant experiences and so on top of that?
Yeah. So I think the future of the software is in being able to compose solution, right? So whether we have a monolith with microservices or a lot of microservices, but that composition, a certain solution will require a certain composition or a group of services together for a ERP or a CRM product or for a financial package. That composition has to be flexible, right? So, and when I do the composition, I need the APIs that allows me to connect all these pieces together. That's what Vish was saying. Actually, the gateway is born when people are started to breaking the monoliths, and now you have to bring all the things back together. A gateway is a component that can do that, right? But unfortunately, as I said in another podcast, we're missing the boat when people went to like social mobile like a couple of years ago, and they had the opportunity to build like disconnected UIs. You have a UI disconnected with your backend. They really didn't do that. They just built a couple of proprietary APIs, or they brought like a responsive app, so the entire stack into the mobile, and they didn't do anything about the APIs, right? So now fast forward, we are on this era of API 2.0, 3.0, whatever you call it, when people are starting to break the monoliths, and they figure out, oh, I don't have APIs, now I have to work on APIs, right? So I think we have missed the boat back then when we were doing mobile. And now, if you haven't done, you have a lot of work to catch up. And API gateways are great technologies to help you with that that journey. But I do hate, terms that people using, in the industry. Have you heard the term of headless, right? Oh, I'm making my software headless. So I'm coming from a, more humanistic. I did actually computer science and all of that, but I also in Italy you get a lot of humanistic, philosophy, history, and all of that, right?
This podcast is heads only, by the way.
Yeah. So when you tell me that are you building a headless software, to me, I'm thinking about the human. You take away the head, right? And then what do you have? You have a zombie, right? That's what you have, because your brain, the most important part of your body is the brain. And now you're saying I'm actually taking away from the software. And what is your software? It's a zombie microservices, right? So I really hate the term headless architecture. You're not building headless architecture, you're building a service. And when you're building a service, the first thing that you start to define is what is the API that you are going to provide. That's your interface of the service. So you start from the API. Your data model is the API. It's not anymore the database. You start defining the API, and then you define your backend and your database model and the UI model as well. Right? So I think that's what I'm very passionate about on this type of architecture, and API gateways plays a role in that.
Yeah. So just to continue on the API gateway, right? I mean, we touched on the core services, but API gateway is a lot more than what we just discussed, right? For example, it provides you great control through, policies like throttling policy, quota policy. You as the enterprise software don't have to worry about these type of non-functional requirements. You can outsource this to the gateway. Same with technical requirements like caching. That is something which we can do in the gateway layer. We can do things like, cookie rewrite and making sure that you have the right response request going forward and so on. So yeah, a gateway is a lot more than security and scalability, and you can bring the whole plethora of functional and non-functional value add for your business APIs on the gateway layer. Right?
Yeah, Vignesh, I have a question for you. I was curious about, a lot of customers say, hey, I already have a gateway product, right? I'm using XYZ. So will your gateway, do I need to replace my gateway to what we have? Or can the two gateways work together? How do you see that? Do you see that in the customer base?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that?
We definitely see that a lot. I mean, our main positioning is that we are the gateway for Infor Cloud Suites. That's where we start. But then we grow so open that we are absolutely capable of providing the same functionality to all other third-party products as well. So if a customer already has a gateway, it's a question of also revenue and the cost for me, because obviously you are paying the license for the other product and you are paying the license for also our gateway. So does it make sense to have two gateways, and is there a real value for it? If not, obviously I would look towards consolidation, and that's number one. Number two, when more products are running behind the same gateway, when they need to talk to each other, it can be happening in a much more esoteric hand-in-glove fashion. It need not come via gateway by making a circle going around. So there are technical reasons, latency, performance, optimization in terms of hardware that you use, license fee that you pay, services engagement fee that you have to pay to get someone else doing the surgery to make it work for your ecosystem. All these factors I would weigh in, and if there is a reason that why I should maintain the two from a business point of view, I would do that. Otherwise, I would definitely look to consolidate one way or the other.
Okay, that's very good feedback. And actually, I now have Mike and Vish both there. It's actually a good question on our data fabric stack, right? So people have seen APIs like a very tiny APIs where I get a status of an order, right? Or I insert an order, But now we use the same gateway to really get huge extractions out of our data platform, right? So, how do you see that? Do you see that use case as another use case coming? Because in the beginning, APIs were just for these tiny, use cases.
That's a tremendous question, actually, because the thing that we found is, we've built this data lake product, right? And we didn't know what was going to happen. And then it turns out people want to get all their data all the time, 10 gigs, 100 gigs of data and everything like that. And we have APIs and asynchronous interfaces, but is that the most appropriate way to do these things? And the answer, generally speaking, is no. I mean, you have to grow to learn that the answer is no, but you have to find solutions to do these things. And I was just having a recent conversation with Vignesh that, a lot of people, when they think of APIs and API gateways, they think of REST. They think of, I have a resource, I want to post, or I want to get something, I want to upload something, or I want to get something and retrieve something. But that is really just one kind of API. And we started getting into it because the thing is, Massimo, like you're right, it's not just simply about, RESTful resources. Like we need data streaming capabilities. We need the ability to ask really advanced questions and graph type approaches of the data using different types of tools and technologies. And we started getting into it with Vignesh. And the thing is, API gateways are not RESTful gateways. They support REST. But Vish, actually, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But like I started getting into it with Vignesh. It's like WebSockets, GraphQL. I mean, that is bread and butter for what gateways are actually intended to do. And it's not just simply REST services, but actually it's really a holistic platform of different ways to satisfy people's thirst for information. So yeah, Vish, take a stab at that.
Sure. Yeah, and like you said, there is no cookie cutter solution, right? There is no cookie cutter API. APIs are, people started using it primarily to exchange data or functionality, right? So it could be, basic APIs where two OS components are talking with each other, or in today's world, when we talk about, modern APIs, web APIs, where distributed systems talk to each other, and then today data is not just, like some resource or some user data or some order data. We have streaming platforms, we have, data lakes where, people want to upload data or download data, right? So really, people should pick like what is the right tool for their problem, right? So it's not about a one cookie cutter solution that's going to satisfy everybody's need. And that's how GraphQL emerged as well, right? So we had constrained devices like mobile applications or smart devices where there was not a lot of space or a lot of bandwidth, or they couldn't afford to do multiple calls. So sort of with REST API, you deal with one resource, and it's the API provider who dictates what data you're going to get, and then like the constraint line says, hey, we want to have a say in this, right? Like we want to dictate what information we want and from which all resources we want. And that's where, GraphQL came in, and, it's really great for, the use cases that it serves. And, on the same lines, like with cloud computing, we got elastic scalability, and, we just got so much powerful application, but that also put pressure on the APIs to increase its efficiency, its scalability, and like With that came in gRPC, where it reduced the overheads and really improved the performance with using HTTP2 and binary formats for data exchange. It's really picking the right tool for the problem where it comes down to, and then API gateways should cater all of the above.
Yeah, and Vish, what is, from your perspective, the biggest frustration when people adopt the gateway? And I give you mine just to share to you. When people do not program on the client side retries, right? Mm-hmm. So they just do a call. Oh, and this is the internet. We know that the internet may be a little slow or intermittent. The internet is not really a reliable protocol, right? But people they assume that I do a call, don't get a response, and then the whole client side fails. Mm-hmm. And while maybe if you do a retry, you may get now the answer back. So do you see that a lot, when people start to use gateways? Do you see any other horrible stories, I would say, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, these are growing pains. I would put it like that, right? So, mm-hmm. Everybody goes through the evolution, and when we start adopting from enterprise world to really this cloud computing, these things like circuit breakers, retries, all these things come into picture. But really, from like I said, these are growing pains. People will go through these evolutions, but really from the API provider side or anybody who is developing the application, the frustrating thing or lack of wide acknowledgement is basically focusing on the developer experience, right? Because with APIs, like you were saying earlier, that with the term headless, they are not really creating headless application. They are just separating the concern, providing separating the data exchange with the user interface, and then the user interfaces could be anything, right? Like your smart device, mobile phone, AR, VR, whatever. Like the user interfaces are indefinite, and with APIs, you're just decoupling your data exchange or functionality exchange. And who is really, giving you that decoupling and adding value on that? It's the developers, right? And then when we don't look at the developer experience, not have great documentation around your APIs, that's when I feel like that's the area we need to focus on, and mm-hmm. Empower the developers, focus on developer experience, and that's just going to help add tremendous value to your APIs.
Great leader answer. Great leader answer. Not throwing anyone under the bus. I'll tell you what.
That's really.
I'll tell you what pisses me off, though.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
You know what it is? It's actually it's the missed opportunity, I think. Right. So it's not about the technology itself, but you know what? I think mm-hmm. APIs affords you such an enormous capacity for flexibility that sometimes people don't actually see the opportunity in front of them. So, Vish, you have to probably see this. Vignesh, I'm sure you do as well. But looking in the big data world, right? More often than not, we're asked for synchronous APIs or synchronous interfaces. Someone wants to have all the benefits of big data, but they want experiences that they're familiar with because they've been writing SQL code into, database management services on their local laptop and machine for the last 12.5 years, right? And then all of a sudden they have this API that expands beyond their wildest imagination, how much data you're actually capturing about your company. And then they say, yeah, but I don't like the fact that this is an asynchronous service. So, okay, if we were to provide a synchronous service for you, what happens when we start to try and give you billions of rows of data and your internet drops? Mm-hmm. Oh, your API, hey, your API keeps dropping. I can't get all of my data. I can't run my business and so on. And rather than seeing the opportunity and seeing the flexibility and the magic behind what APIs and being able to compose all this stuff brings to the table, people start to get kind of like look over their shoulder and think like, but I used to do it this way. I'm familiar and I'm used to these things. So, I mean, for anyone that's really looking at the tooling and the upskilling opportunities that they have, they really should be looking at what is the API economy. What are APIs actually giving to the business that we're not being able to take advantage of today? Because things like gateways, different approaches for being able to extract and connect to services, compose and mash them together, and everything like that can drive infinitely more value than if all we expect at the end of the day is basically database services. And that's just my world in the data lake. But you know what? Until we had databases, people were perfectly fine with spreadsheets, right? And you probably had a lot of people saying, but I can do that in the spreadsheet. So, I mean,
Well,
every generation.
they do that today as well.
Yeah, exactly.
They still do that today. So no, I totally agree. That's another thing. Actually, that was a question I had actually for Vignesh. You know, there are these two worlds of event-driven architectures versus APIs, right? And actually, both worlds are very good because you have integration styles where maybe event-driven is better than to do real-time, and there you have other integration styles that where real-time maybe it's better, right? So, and I was reading on the internet that there is this new definition called asynchronous APIs. So people are starting now to merge these two worlds. But how do you see that, going in the future, asynchronous, or event-driven versus real-time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking ahead, that's one of the strong trends in the API evolution that you are going to see, that the asynchronous API is a term that you're going to hear a lot. We already discussed a bit of concepts like WebSockets. That's where that is going to pick up from what I see. Traditionally, API interactions are a request response pattern, which means both of them are locked, and then there is always a scope for timeouts and so on. But I think that pattern will evolve into an asynchronous API pattern where there is a kind of a perpetual channel that's open between the two parties, and both of them are hooked on to listening to each other. And as data flows, they just receive them in an event-driven fashion. So I think the current strong synchronous API architecture will evolve into an asynchronous API. That's one. And the other way of looking at it is that you trigger a job through an API and let it run asynchronously, and you go back and ask for the final result, which we in our business we do a lot as well, especially for big data use cases. So these are definitely upcoming trends, and I see that as a natural evaluation mainly for big data based use cases.
So Mike gets all the innovation on his data lake platform,
Yeah.
right? He's a lucky guy.
Actually,
It's not
he's
so empty
pushing us
now, is it?
to-
Huh?
He's pushing us on WebSockets. We are absolutely busy with it. Yes.
Yeah, and you've
Yeah,
come
that's-
here.
that's
You've
good.
come here today to commit to everybody listening the date and time at which
I can
Right.
sign.
Yeah.
I can sign the.
Right.
hey,
I have a. Oh yeah, go ahead.
no, yeah, all you, Masma.
Yeah, no, actually, I had another question for Vish, which is actually very, very interesting, is orchestrations, right? So now orchestrating multiple API calls. Well, when I call just one API, you have one target API behind, you are depending on the target application, the quality of the API, if you need to apply a policy, if the target system is slow or fast, But now when you orchestrate multiple API calls that could go to different applications or portions, what are the technical challenge, when you do that, when you build such orchestration?
That's a great question, and really, it also ties into a couple of topics that we talked earlier, right? So one is the API gateways, like the way they started, but nowadays they have become like fundamental part of any API deployment, and then going beyond that, they are becoming like complete API lifecycle management. So with an API backend as a service or the API orchestration that you brought up, so these are like the value that the API gateways are adding and just going beyond being the entry point. And then the another thing about the good documentation and user experience or developer experience is where when you have good documentation, we could build cool solutions like an API metadata where we programmatically parse the APIs and let these solutions like API orchestration or workflow or doc flow or Coleman skills being built on top of that. So, really these 2 points are, just emphasizing the importance of that. And then, while orchestrating, that's really great thing, right? So, there are two situations where, again, you may have synchronous API, quickly responding, or you may have something long running process. And that's where, again, you pick the right tool for your job, where, if you know that you are having synchronous orchestration, you go for something like the API flow, or if you see some long running process which you want to do like event driven, then maybe tap into more of a doc flow workflow kind of pattern where you're going to get long running process.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. And so the documentation, what's the latest standard? People using Swagger. What's the latest trend there in documenting APIs?
Yeah. So the Open API spec has been, it has become de facto standard, and it's really great way to document the APIs. It focuses around REST APIs, so that's one of the drawback of some of the other protocols, where with GraphQL you don't really have good way to document your API, because it's the client dictating what data is being exchanged. Same thing with gRPCs, like we don't see any something like Open API specification level of documentation. And then Open API specification is really, had tremendous tool set around it, so the design first approach, where, so not just API first, but you go API all in on API first, and then you go design first, where you design the API and then the tooling is available, so that, you can generate the server, you can generate the client, and, with couple of clicks or couple of commands, you have the boilerplate code. So, and then the features like InAPI metadata, which is again built on top of Open API spec. It's been really a great addition for API documentation.
So the technology is ahead of the documentation and the usability these days.
Yeah, that's awesome. But then documenting APIs is really important. So we'll have to see, like GraphQL and the other standards, how we will deal with the documentation. I do have another question for Vignesh, actually, because I'm passionate about APIs. You see that. And it's all about APIs. And actually, Rick just walked away. He's always scared about APIs. That's why he's not here. But I do actually have a question for Vignesh. So in 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we had more what I call adapter type of architectures, where you would have an adapter on the server side and you had a client side, and then a vendor like would provide a client side for .NET, a client side for Java, or a client side or another proprietary client side, right? Then then we went to web services and SOAP, and then in the gateway, essentially we say, well, I expose my API, you figure it out, how you gonna call it and deal with the repeating calls, error handling and blah blah blah. Do you see that this trend of having some client side owned by not by the programmer on the client side, but you're gonna have an SDK on the client side? You see that trend coming back, or will never come back anymore? We'll always deal like, this is my gateway, this is my API on the server side. You figure it. You have all the technology. You should be able to call these APIs.
Yeah, you highlighted the small drawbacks of the current model. But of course, the big win that we have with the model that you just explained is the whole possibility of API economy, right? With the current model, what happens is you just publish your APIs. Through that, what you actually manage to do is you democratize the value, you unlock the value. If the API is local to just your server, then just to a specific clients, then there is no more scope for it. But the moment you publish it as an open API, you are empowering the developers out there, like Vish was saying, to come with an innovative idea and to build a whole ecosystem around it. So the API actually becomes a platform on which people can come with smart ideas and make money themselves, right? So I think that advantage to me far exceeds any misuse or any type of client side poor practices causing issues. I think simply on the server side, we need to mature, and absolutely things like gateway are very helpful, right? I think to me that API economy story is probably the biggest success story of the API concept as a whole. I mean, who would have thought Google has this wonderful maps, but then they also made the same maps available as APIs. So not just Google through browser of going to the map site is not the only application. People can build a whole economy around it, like we have funda.nl in the Netherlands or any other real estate site. They are building a real estate business based on location for which they use Google Maps. Uber is building taxi hiring service based on Google Maps, and so on. So that is the advantage of developers thinking of smart ideas, using APIs to get empowered, build new applications, and make money. Of course, that will have some drawbacks, exactly like you mentioned, that they always do not follow the best practice. They forgot a semicolon or a comma, which goes into a while loop, making millions of requests, and that's where we need a gateway which has got a circuit breaker, which has got a quota policy, throttling policy. So we just have to be monkey proof. But I think the advantages far exceed any other control that we may have to necessarily put.
Yeah, but the other thing, Vignesh, and the question for Vish as well and Mike, it's so we have this API economy, and you can build different experiences. Google has their own app, but you can build other apps. At the same time, we sometimes see even in internal development teams that when you say, well, you provide the backend with the API, and there's going to be another team building an experience, then you get some frictions like, yeah, they want to own all the end-to-end, right? You see that, well, on paper, it's good that it's decoupled, and you can, but on the other side, development managers or developers really just like, I want to also build the UI, I should own the end-to-end, right? So there is, the architecture allows that, but now developers like, I don't want other team building another experience, right? But it should be possible.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also to do with the change management and culture shift here of building software for cloud versus building software locally. If you are building software for cloud, you have to pick your battles, right? You are an enterprise service provider. You focus on adding last mile functionality to your enterprise software and not worry too much on the infrastructural needs, non-functional requirements, security, and so on, right? So in those areas, if you want to retain the control, I think that's a battle you better, not fight, and you better stick to your core competency and outsource this to the real specialists.
Yeah, let me ask you, which is more on the development side. So, which I know you provide the gateway, so you should be the evangelist of, you have a backend with APIs. It should be possible to build different experience by different development teams, or you see that there are challenges to that.
So definitely, we know in software engineering, like all these years of learning, we know the importance of separation of concern, right? And then, all the best practices of reusability and, scalability and localized experience. And to me, really, I don't see any drawback with the API first approach. Actually, we look at, like the mandate that Mike brought up earlier, right? Which fueled or brought in the era of serverless, service-oriented architecture. And, really, if I can say that, maybe it has, foundations for Amazon, launching AWS, or like the shared or collaborative economy being built. So you look at all these success stories, and then, you say if you have a strong argument saying, this is not going to work for me, that's great. It's your choice. But, look at the pattern, look at the trends, what is the proven approach, and, that advocates for the API first approach for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I work great with all teams,
so
Massimo.
Mikey, you are building different experiences on top of the same APIs on your product line?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're actually getting to use a lot of cool technologies, right? So
I haven't seen those, but we will see.
All right, we'll have to come back in a couple of episodes and do instead of a whiteboard, a demo, right?
Yeah, then we'll do a demo.
No, I mean, by its very virtue, right? I live and work in the data services and everything like that. So it's amongst the least sexy parts of what people want to see in software. So, I'm personally challenged in trying to come up with clever and cool ways to make data usable and actually fun to use and elegant, or at least frictionless. So yeah, we develop APIs for everything, and we work with so many other teams, data cataloging platforms, integration platforms to figure out, as we continue to extend and enhance, our integration platform's 10 plus years old, something like that, right? 10?
Yeah.
So, they've been around the block for a very long time. And as we introduce so many new concepts, it's working with so many other teams to say, hey, we've got these new ideas that are coming around, let's work together and say, hey, let's introduce some new services or interoperability measures. For our UI stuff, we're even getting to play around with GraphQL, actually build out highly responsive services and get to play around in those technologies and work with other teams to do that as well. So yeah, I mean, I love the entire, it's the composability. I mean, if we're getting it as a vendor, we're getting to do this in the software that we build for other people. You as a developer building for a project or a product or whatever it might be, get that same experience in composing really whatever you feel like building, right? I mean, we give you all the parts, pieces, and everything like that, and you can just start mishmashing. So that goes back to, a few episodes ago, we had the Mongoose team tell us all about low code and no code, right? All these things start coming together to then, it starts collapsing or reducing those barriers to coming up with new ways to consume information, apart from like the old, and sorry for any ERP people listening, but like the old filing cabinet way, like, ERPs are just filing cabinets for how to store that information. And if I want to get the data, I got to go back to the filing cabinet. Now we have so many new ways driven by APIs underneath the covers, but also with low code and no code platforms and gateways and all this other magical stuff, black magic, that you're able to build out some really, really incredible things. And not only that, you're able to do it fast. Like that's also the most incredible thing to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and actually, I love that you brought up the low code part, because that's actually, if you claim to have low code, well, it's very convenient if you have APIs. Otherwise, it's going to be not really a low code. You're going to have to program a lot, code. Right? So low code comes, all code, not low code, but all code. Indeed. So I have a last question for both guys. Same question for both. I started with Vignesh. Vignesh, what is the biggest trend that we have to watch on APIs from your perspective? And then, Vish, the same question for you.
Yeah, I think most of what we already discussed, like the evaluation of Web 3.0 with things like GraphQL, things like asynchronous APIs, also having APIification based on some kind of no-code, low-code platform, which we, by the way, have. That API documentation standards, which Vish mentioned, that the new standards are still yet to catch up on the documentation optimization. So we need some strong trends to emerge that, which will lead the industry. And of course, privacy and security will definitely going to remain the top all the time, because that's an area where constantly hackers also get smart and people also get smart to misuse and do everything. So absolutely on the security front, also you see new trends coming up to keep the APIs secure on the internet. That's a short.
Absolutely. Vish?
Yeah, I mean, Vignesh said it right. Security, privacy concerns, that's going to be the main theme, going to stay going forward. The consumer becoming more aware, or just the API providers doing the right thing. Security and privacy is a main theme in there. But also looking at, some things that are technologically things that are coming, right? Like IoT or HTTP3 coming up, or ML, edge computing, where, now, you may have a car running on a street, doing all kind of crazy calculations and computations and, talking to the mothership to make some decisions. And with that, the communication between distributed application is gonna, it's just gonna explode.
It's more like we were talking with Mike, telemetry almost, like API, telemetry API almost, right? So really real time, that type of things, right?
Same question to you, Massimo. What about you? What do you think the future looks like?
Well, I actually don't want to say the future, but we get these guys, the API guys, on the call, right? And at the same time, we talked about that. I'm very frustrated that we have RPA platforms, right? But why do we have RPA platforms and screen scraping all kind of things on the web? Right. Because people hasn't built APIs, right? So that's really the reality. And so my future is that I'm predicting it's not about API gateways or technology around that, but the RPA vendors are going to be dead, and they are going to have to figure it out how to do other things. So you see RPA vendors buying API gateways products, do acquisition in that area, or buying OCR, or buying process intelligence, right? So because now as people are figuring out APIs, the RPA use case is dead, right? And we're gonna go more on that. So my prediction is not per se in that, but it's that RPA vendors will change dramatically into API gateway vendors.
By the way, who's our RPA product manager?
Ooh,
that is what I say. That's Vignesh. So Vignesh is building both worlds. You see, that's the funny part.
I have the unique vantage point of having both backend automation, system automation with APIs, as well as the front-end automation with RPA. Right? Of course, both have their own strengths, but Massimo is right that in the far-fetched future, obviously, the backend automations and APIification would slowly pave the way to sunset the traditional RPA as we know it. But who knows? We'll see. Maybe we are proven wrong.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to say also on the API trend is that obviously, it's a given nowadays that data is the new oil, right? And of course, APIs are the key to unlock that oil, to dig that oil out. So from that perspective, the big data-based access and the data-driven APIs also would be a trend to watch for.
Yeah, don't say that to Mike Oil, because he drives electric and oil is dead.
Indeed.
Oil is like RPA, electric is the new trend.
Yeah, but Massimo,
right? So
Massimo, you know what he just said? He just said APIs are pipelines. We got pipelines.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Honestly, it was really, really fantastic to actually have you on. And I honestly, there's so much to talk about this, and I could do an entire just quizzical asking you guys questions about gRPC, future GraphQL, and what that's enabling. And we'll have to do it again soon enough. So maybe in a couple of months we'll have you back. But I wanted to say thanks for joining and really appreciate it. And if you're listening at home or watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe, or subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify. What else do we have? That's also on YouTube and everywhere else, right? So thanks much, guys. And until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.